Hi, in this video I'm going to be sharing information that relates to colour, specifically to midway colour applications and permanent colour applications. I'm going to be talking about the colour wheel and refreshing information relating to that. I'll talk about colour pigments and the effect of colour on hair and on the hair shaft, the impact of dipetals and the characteristics of the hair and scalp in terms of colour selection and the colour processes. And we're going to look at colour selection and the factors around that. We're also going to be talking very briefly about the application. You'll find resources in the topic blocks at Inditech Online. So let's make a start first at refreshing on the colour wheel. We all know that the primary, secondary and tertiary colours are what create the colour wheel and the colour spectrum. Our primary colours are red, yellow and blue, and our secondary colours are orange, green and violet. In terms of the colours between, they're referred to as tertiary colours. We also need to remember that the colour wheel has a warm side and a cool side, and this line through the colour wheel is what illustrates that division. So if we have a look here, on this side of the colour wheel we're seeing our cool colours, and on this side of the colour wheel we see our warm colours. So anything that relates to fire and sun is a warm colour, and anything that relates to your blues and your earthy tones, waters and ice are our cool colours. Opposites on the colour wheel are counter colours, and it's really important that you understand how counter colours work, particularly if you're using colour or to counter a reflect that's unwanted, or if you're using colour to tone down a reflect that's unwanted. So we'll just recap that as well. Opposites on the colour wheel neutralise or counter colour. So in this respect, if a client's hair is throwing yellow, we would use a violet in our mixation to counter that yellow. Likewise, if a client's throwing red or orange, we would look opposite to see which mixation additive we would use to counter that unwanted reflect. So now we've recapped on the colour wheel, let's move on to talk about the impact of colour on the hair shaft. Now before we do that, you need to know about the colour molecules. Now these are contained in the cortex, and the area of the hair shaft that is affected by colour is the cortex. First and foremost, let's think about the natural colour of hair and the natural melanin that is contained in the cortex of the hair shaft. The three types of melanin are eumelanin, phenylalanine and oxymelanin. The eumelanin is the black and the brown colour pigment which creates the level of the hair colour, the natural hair colour. So the lighter the hair colour, the less eumelanin contained. The darker, the more eumelanin contained. Phenylalanine is responsible for the reflets, and that is contained in all of the levels, but there is a higher percentage of it as you get slightly lighter versus your eumelanin. And oxymelanin is your colourless melanin. Colour is aniline derivative. Now aniline is actually white in its natural form, and when it's exposed to oxygen it becomes darker. When we colour hair, any of the colour products we put in here contain aniline derivative. With regard to the chemical process of hair colour, I wanted to first talk about the effect of colour on the hair shaft. And what colour does is lightens the natural colour molecules and replaces the natural colour molecules with artificial colour molecules. Now in order to do that we need to have quite a high percentage of developer to cause that oxidation process to reduce the natural colour pigment in hair. Now you might need to think about that for a moment before we move on. So if we first look at the different types of colour and how they impact on the hair, I can explain that further. With a temporary colour, that impacts on the cuticle. It consists of large colour molecules that coat the cuticle. With semi-permanent colour, that consists of large and medium colour molecules that coat and penetrate the underside of the cuticle. They do not have any impact on the cortex. In terms of midway and permanent colour, which is what we're looking at today, this has the impact on the cortex. In our midway colour range, we use 1.5 and 1.9% developers. Now they do enough to open the cuticle and allow the colour molecules to penetrate the cortex. So firstly, if we think about midway colour, with the oxidation process created by the hydrogen peroxide, the colour molecules will cluster. The cuticle has been raised and the colour molecules from the artificial mixation will penetrate into the cortex. With the oxidation, the colour molecules will cluster loosely and they become too large to escape, so they're trapped within the cortex. The longevity with the midway colour comes from those clustered formations. What we need to understand is that because we're only using a small or a lower percentage developer, we're going to get a loose cluster, and in time those clusters break down, allowing the colour to escape from within the cortex. So when we refer to midway colour, that colour penetrates the cortex, clusters loosely, the cuticle is closed, the antioxidant conditioner, and the colour is trapped in the hair shaft. Over time, those clusters break down and the colour fades out, and that's what makes it different from a permanent colour which has that permanent lasting quality. If we think about the effect of permanent colour on hair, we're generally with permanent colour working with higher percentage developers, and our permanent colour contains ammonia. Now this ammonia is a catalyst for that oxidation process, and so we get more oxidation, we get a reduction of colour molecules in the cortex, and those colour molecules that have been reduced to clear are replaced with the artificial colour molecules. Now with the higher percentage developer, you will find that the colour molecules will form larger, tighter clusters, and with that they don't break down, they become trapped in the hair, the cuticle is closed with an antioxidant conditioner, and that new colour is trapped in the hair. So just to recap the effect of permanent colour on the hair shaft, the cuticle is raised with the chemical product, the colour molecules from the mixation penetrate the cortex, the oxidation takes place because the ammonia in the colour is a catalyst for the higher percentage of developer, which allows a higher reduction in the colour molecules. So the natural colour molecules are reduced and the pigment from the artificial colour is replacing the colour in the hair with the new shade. Once those colour molecules have clustered, they will be too large to escape the hair shaft, and an antioxidant conditioner closes the cuticle, trapping the colour in the hair. I'm now going to talk briefly about the effect of hydrogen peroxide. You'll have this in your resource as well, but it's really important that you understand what hydrogen peroxide does to colour and hair to create that permanent or midway effect. As I've said earlier, with midway colour, because the hydrogen peroxide is weaker, you get a breakdown of the clustering of the molecules and the colour doesn't last as long. It's used in a number of things, and people think, oh, it's only used for hair colouring, but in actual fact it has a wide variety of purposes. And what hydrogen peroxide is this unstable product that is suspended in water, which is what we use in our products in hairdressing. So we have a hydrogen peroxide that's suspended in water. The ratio of hydrogen peroxide to the ratio of water varies with the percentage, and there's more information in your resources about this. Something that's really important for you to understand as well is the effect of the hydrogen peroxide. So in permanent colouring, one of the roles is obviously, its key role is oxidation, and in permanent colouring its role is to reduce the colour pigment to clear so that we can replace that colour pigment with the artificial colour molecules. So refer to your resource book for more information on hydrogen peroxide and its role in colouring. Today we're focusing on midway and permanent colouring. So when we're focusing on midway colouring, we have to think about what the advantages or the characteristics of midway colour are in our services. So here I just have a little list. With midway colour, we can match or go brighter or darker. We can't lighten with midway colour. It's a non-ammonia colour, so it's going to have less sensitivity on the hair and less reaction with the hair. We can use it to brighten or to refresh a permanent colour if we have had problems with the colour lasting or fadage. It can make a tonal change with colour, particularly if a client is trying to grow a colour out and it becomes a little bit brassy. You can use your non-oxidative midway colours to just tone that brassiness or that unwanted reflect out of the hair. The benefits include providing a really nice long-lasting shine, and that's one of the huge things with midway colour. Without that chemical process, you can colour match with permanent colour if you're wanting to lengthen the longevity or the time that you're wearing a permanent colour, or if a client starts thinking about growing a permanent colour out. Certainly with midway colour, one of the biggest advantages is there's not that huge commitment to colour. So sometimes a client has been light for a length of time and then suddenly decides they want to go really dark. It's really important you just don't leap in and tint them dark with permanent colour, because if they then change their mind and want to go light again, you have to go through that whole lightening process. Whereas if they perhaps make a start with a midway colour, then they will find that they can change their mind without such a big fuss to get that colour back out of there. So the characteristics of midway colour are also listed in your resources, and it'll be really important for you to reflect on those so that you can understand how you're working with them with your clients and how to bring them into your client base. So we've looked at the characteristics of midway colour, and now let's look at the characteristics of our permanent colour. All of us have used or seen permanent colour being used in the salon. And we know that the characteristics as opposed to midway colour are that permanent colour that grows out and leaves a regrowth line. It is a colour that is created by the reduction of the natural colour molecules being replaced with a firm cluster of permanent colour molecules. It generally has a higher impact on the sensitivity of the hair and can build up quicker than midway colour as well. I think it's really important to understand that there are distinct differences between permanent colour and midway colour. So we have midway colour is non-ammonia, whereas permanent colour is an ammonia-based product 9 times out of 10. Midway creates less sensitivity than permanent colour. There's less of a long-term commitment with midway colour in terms of permanent colour needs to either be removed or coloured or lighter. You can't use permanent colour to go lighter on top of permanent colour. Permanent colour will lighten the natural level, whereas midway colour won't lighten the natural level. And we have a wider range of colours available to us in our permanent range than we do in our midway range. So tone on tone for midway, wide range of colours that will produce lighter results, or you can lighten natural hair with permanent colour. Remember, you can't lighten permanent colour or colour with colour. Let's think about how the characteristics of hair and scalp impact on our colour service. The characteristics are to petals, and we start with the density. That will have an impact on your selection and the finished result. When you have such a lot of hair on the head, it's inclined to look more dense, and the colour will look stronger and can look darker if the hair is thick and lies flat and you can't get that light reflection coming in from underneath. With porosity, that's going to impact in terms of the hair holding the colour and whether the hair grabs the colour and then lets it go just as easily because it's so porous, and the cuticle may be damaged so the clusters escape easily. Texture has probably the largest impact on colour selection. If you imagine a fat strand of hair, which is your coarse strand, and a fine strand of hair, which is a thinner strand, it stands to reason that you're not going to get as many colour molecules inside that hair strand. And so coarse hair will take more colour as a product, and it will also hold colour better than fine hair will. because you're simply putting more colour molecules in there, creating more clusters, and therefore creating a stronger, more vibrant, more dense colour. Now fine hair will sometimes take colour very, very quickly because there's not much, and some salons have quite dark or vibrant colour schemes. Now these can impact on what throws from the lighting around it onto the hair. So think about your salon environment and how that might impact on what the client sees as her colour. Now if we think about colour selection and the things that we need to consider when we're selecting either a midway or a permanent colour, these come from the client's wants and needs first and foremost, but then that's influenced by the characteristics of density, porosity and texture. It's also influenced by the client's natural skin tone, their base level, any presence of existing colour, the percentage of grey, the presence of unequal colour. That's an interesting factor because sometimes we forget about the existence of an unequal colour when we're selecting colour. Choose your end result first and then look at what's existing before you actually select your mixation. If you have an unequal colour from previous lightning or sun bleach or foils or a bi-level colour or an area that's darker underneath, you have to take that into consideration when you're selecting your colour, and the client needs to know that that's going to impact on the end result as well. So you refer to your resource in terms of the areas that impact on colour selection, and it is really important that you pay attention to these things that I've pointed out to you today. In terms of application, you'll be guided by your senior stylists. So I'm just going to briefly outline the different types of applications that are familiar to us in the salon. We have our retouch applications, which are the applications that are applied to the area that doesn't have either midway colour or permanent colour on the hair. We have full head applications, which are colours that are applied from roots to ends. Now that's going to impact on whether there's any pre-existing colour and whether or not you're using a fashion shade. If you're applying a fashion vibrant shade, you need to be careful that you don't apply to the roots first with permanent colour. So that should be applied around 2.5 centimetres from the scalp to the hair ends and then applied to the scalp. Now there's more information on your applications in your resource at Inditech Online, and be guided by your senior stylists as well. So just recapping, a retouch is applied to the natural hair. There'll be an existing colour on the mid-lengths and ends, or the area that has already had colour, and you're matching the colour on the area that is virgin hair or natural hair. A full head colour is applied from roots to ends, but any of your fashion shades, you need to be careful that you're not going to get that root glow or that glow at the scalp caused by heat in the application. Therefore, a fashion shade should be applied around about 2.5 centimetres from the scalp to the hair ends, depending on the length. Clearly, if the hair's only that long, it will be maybe 2 centimetres from the scalp to the hair ends. And then you'll come in and you'll apply to the roots. In terms of midway applications, we have full head applications as a general rule. But if a client has an existing permanent colour that they might be growing out and they're just using midway to take them through that process, then you'll apply to the regrowth first. You may allow the colour to start processing and then apply to the ends, depending on whether they are super faded or whether there's a distinct difference in the end result colour. In terms of fashion colours, your very vibrant fashion shades in midway should still be applied out from the scalp to the hair ends, and then once oxidation has occurred, you can apply them to the scalp. You will still get root glow with a midway colour. So it's really important you understand that fashion shade application. So let's just recap what we've looked at today. We've looked at the colour wheel, and we've looked at the colour pigment and aniline derivative colour that we use in hair. I've talked about the impact of colour on hair in terms of midway colour and permanent colour. I've talked about the impact of our characteristics of the hair and scalp and the considerations in our consultation that we need to think about when we're selecting our colour shade. I've also talked about hydrogen peroxide and how this impacts on our colour surfaces. Remembering that with our low percentage developer, 1.5, 1.9, we don't get that colour reduction of the natural colour molecules, we just get a clustering of the colour molecules which breaks down quickly. With the higher percentage developer, the role of hydrogen peroxide in that sense is to reduce the natural colour pigment and cause higher oxidation levels for the colour molecules to cluster more firmly and stay in the hair for longer lengths of time. So now I need to talk about the safety aspects around all colour processes. We know that colour molecules and different products that we use in the hairdressing salon can cause allergic reactions, and it's really important as a stylist that you understand that permanent colour and midway colour have that potential to have an impact on a client in terms of an allergic reaction. Even if that client has had colour time and time again, out of the blue a client can become reactive to a colour surface. So it's really important we perform a predisposition test 24 to 48 hours, depending on your manufacturer's instructions, prior to a colour surface. And what is equally as important is that we're using the brand of colour that the client is going to have used on her hair. Remembering that the darker the colour, if we reflect on what we talked about earlier in terms of the colour products, the darker the colour, the more aniline is contained in the product. My recommendation is to use the same colour to test the client. Now the PD test is applied either behind the ear or on any of the pulse points. In the elbow is a really good area because a client can hide it if they're waiting for a colour surface. Obviously 24 to 48 hours before, they probably don't want to have a big patch on the side of their neck if they're having to go to work. So generally we place these in the crook of the arm, on the elbow, on the pulse point. Once you place that test on there, you cover it and tell the client that they shouldn't take it off or remove it, and they shouldn't wash the colour off their arm before the colour surface. You need to sight if there's been any reaction, and you need to see it intact. It's also really important to let the client know any possible reactions that could occur from that tiny little patch on their arm, and any reactions that could occur with hair colour on their hair. So some of the reactions that can occur are inflammation of the skin and localized swelling or red or itchiness of the area where the test patch has been placed, or of the scalp when we've got the product on the hair. In terms of severe reactions, a client could suffer with distortions or swelling of the facial features, or swelling of any area where the colour has sat, which can be quite severe. Colour can also create a really severe reaction known as anaphylactic shock. Now this is really intense, it's a really strong reaction to the colour process, and a client needs to be very aware that it is potentially life-threatening and they should seek immediate medical attention. Now some of the indicators of anaphylactic shock are severe and sudden onset of itchiness and redness, a swelling, tingling of the tongue, swelling of the hands and feet, their throat feeling like it's closing up or that their throat is swelling, difficulty breathing. In severe cases, it's really important you stay calm. There will be a salon procedure for how to act in the event a client suffers anaphylactic shock. What is super important is that you act quickly but calmly. So have another stylist ring for an ambulance, 111, follow any first aid procedures, checking airways, making sure that you remove any restrictions on the airways. Make sure you keep the other clients in the salon calm until the medical team arrive to help you. So to recap what I've talked about today, I've discussed the colour wheel and those areas surrounding primary, secondary and tertiary colours, warm colours, cool colours and complementary colours. I've also discussed the pigments of artificial colour and the natural pigments of hair. We've looked at the effect of colour on the hair shaft in terms of midway colour and permanent colour, and how hydrogen peroxide will impact on our colour surfaces and how hydrogen peroxide impacts on colour. I've looked at the considerations, or talked about the considerations of colour selection. I've looked at the characteristics of midway colour and talked briefly about the characteristics of permanent colour. And I have talked about predisposition tests and the need to check for allergies in relation to permanent and midway colour and the effects that that may or could have on a client in terms of an allergic reaction. Today's video will provide you with the information that will help you to select colour and use colour within the services in our salon.